Once again, welcome back to the channel. Diving back into the Ranger project here. Hopefully on this episode we're actually going to get this thing running and driving. But I'll show you some of the stuff I got done, and then we'll talk about more of the stuff we need to get done before we can get this thing on the road. So I built a custom intercooler here. I'll go ahead and put a link in the description on that video, or maybe something up in here if I can figure that out. But I did a whole video separate from the Ecoboost series on how I built that. But pretty much that fits in there in front of where the radiator is. Can't really, well, I mean, you see something back there, but you don't know it's an intercooler. It just looks like a aluminum radiator. So hopefully get the radiator in this week or next. It's had a custom radiator made from a Griffin radiator, so that's gonna go right in front of that. And then once you get that in there, we'll start plumbing the coolant lines, and then also button up some of these other hoses. Right now, I just got done building this charge tube right here. Pretty much the same way as I did this air intake. Tried doing the polished look, but that didn't turn out so well because I kept fighting air leaks, so it's kind of half polished, half not. There's some weld beads on there and some ground down welds, so that's just going to be what it is. I guess future I recommend not doing the polished look unless you really wanted to, unless you're a better welder than me. Anyway, moving forward, I have a, you can get it here, Turbo Smart bypass valve, or it's a blow-off valve, but it's a recirculating one. The reason I'm going with this is because I don't really want the sound of a blow-off valve. Factory, it was a bypass valve, but just dumped it back in the intake. But I saw some reviews that say, you know, if you start going into high performance on this stuff, you really should have one of these manual blow-off valves instead of the electric one that the factory uses. So went with Turbo Smart. Was working around trying to figure out how I was going to put this in here, but pretty much what I'm going to do is weld the bung right here into the inlet of the intercooler. It's going to sit and face that way, and then we'll cut and weld a tube that ties right into the air inlet right here, and it'll sit about like that. And then we'll run some lines over. Still waiting. I mean, it's kind of a disaster trying to get some information from Ford Performance, but trying to get a vacuum diagram for this engine has been a challenge. Just trying to figure out the best way to tap into whatever ports are on here, because I need to reconfigure what the factory was. I need a boost reference for this, and then the heater box needs a vacuum source. So I need to figure out what stuff is valved and what stuff is going to be on under boost, because there's certain things I want boost reference and other things that I don't want boost reference. Also, probably previous episodes I talked about boost referencing the fuel regulator. It turns out Ford updated their instructions for it, and now they say not to boost reference your regulator. So I guess we won't do that. I haven't got a straight answer on why that is. Anything else before we start working on some stuff? Oh yeah, I'm making a custom throttle body spacer angle plate. It's going to be 3D printed. I already designed it, waiting on my friend to 3D print that. But pretty much, let's see if we can look at it here. Got this angle offset here from where the outlet is, the intercooler, to where the throttle body is. I couldn't really move this over because that would have been in the way of the radiator. I needed as much, the radiator is going to be pretty small for the power output, so I needed as much space as I could for it. Pretty much what we're going to do is space this out a little bit, angle it 25 degrees, and that should line that up right with that. And we'll have another coupler in here and a really short piece of pipe to run between them. So once I get that, I'll go ahead and bolt that on and show you guys. But right now, since I got this pipe in here, gonna go ahead and take my intercooler back out, drill a hole, and then weld this bung on there, and then we'll start building the bypass pipe that'll get welded onto the air intake pipe here. So a quick little thing before we jump over to intercoolers. One thing I forgot to mention is what this guy was. This is a surge tank. The radiator, it's not gonna have a filler cap. It's going to have a air bleed line that runs over to this, and this is going to have a main drain goes down to this part right here. That's how the motor was originally in the Mustang, was it had a high point surge tank, and it has a vent coming off the engine over here that also run to it. So I want to try to duplicate that. I designed and built this. I'll toss in some photos of that. It's fully baffled inside, has outlet, 2 inlets, fill, and then the sight port here. And also it's braced down here along with bolted up there. So it's good and rigid. Hopefully it'll hold up pretty good and do what I need. So I guess I just messed up and didn't record any of that, but pretty much used these step drill bits and punched out a hole so that will fit on there. We'll end up grinding this down so it fits around this pipe a little better because there's a big old gap on the side. But I'll put a link in the description. If you don't have any step drill bits, they're a pretty good tool to get. This one's a Klein tool. It goes up to 1 3/8. And I got a whole set here, Milwaukee, all different sizes. Pretty good thing to have in your toolbox, so I'll put a link in there for you to check that out. So I got this ground down so it conforms to the pipe, and it fits on there pretty well. And we'll double check for square, but go ahead and get this set up on the welding table there and tack this in and double check in the truck to make sure it's going to all fit, and then we'll go ahead and burn that in. So I got the intercooler set back in here. I got that base tacked on there. We'll go ahead and set this blow-off valve on here and take a look. It really looks like really good position for it. Enough clearance there for a T-band clamp around that coupler, and looks like it'll be in a really good place just to take a pipe right over and a slight radius up and tie right into this intake elbow here. So I got this all welded up around here. It was a bit hard on this back side, not the best weld job. We're going to go ahead and leak test this kind of like we did the rest of this. Kind of have a contraption rigged up on here. So in order to put pressure on here and not have this blow off, I need to put pressure on this side, the blow off valve also. So I kind of had a splitter here, a blow off tool, and then some rubber hose, so that is pressurized also. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up my test bucket, dunk this side in, and hopefully there's no air bubbles coming off. So I got the intercooler back in here, got all the little pinholes fixed, and working on this next piece of the plumbing. I cut a piece of straight pipe and then did more pie chunks here to get a bend in it. And now I need to kind of grind that away so it fits the radius of this pipe. It's going to be a funky shape, and a lot of this kind of come off, but I built it up more than I needed to so I can grind it down. Of course, I didn't want to make it easy for myself, so we'll start grinding and cutting and see if we can get this to fit around that. So I got this pipe all ground down. It's kind of a funky shape, but it fits on there. Actually fits that way, like so. Anyway, gonna drill this out, kind of grind it out close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And then we'll go ahead and tack this on, double check the fitment, and then do a finish weld. So that's all welded up and plumbed in. I'll have to get some clamps on there when I final install. Now we're going to work on the other side here with the throttle body. I designed a spacer angle plate here, and then I had my friend 3D print it. So I'm going to test fit this up here, see how it works out, and then hopefully this all works, and then once that's angled, then we'll build a short piece right here, and that'll all couple up together. Got this all bolted up. It fits pretty good. There was some clearancing issues back here because I didn't account for the motor drive on the throttle body, but with the plastic it was easy to just grind that down. Should be good and stout. Of course, a better option would be to have it machined out of aluminum, but that's not cheap. That'd be pretty expensive, and this was less than $5 in 3D printing material. So gonna hopefully go forward with that. I'm going to change plans. Was going to do an intermediate pipe here, but really don't have much room with it once you start stacking these couplers. So I ordered a 45 transition. Hopefully it's long enough that we'll be able to just put a rubber coupler between these two and call it good. Right now I'm moving over to some water fittings. Have the surge tank in here, and got this T-fitting on the engine, part of the recirculating, and this hose here went to the factory Mustang surge tank, which kind of sat up around here. So what I need to do is make a fitting that has a 90 for these two hoses and a piece that goes straight up here so I can tie into here. Unfortunately, no one makes that, so I'm going to make one of my own. What I have here is two brass 90s barbed. What I'm going to do is cut one of these off and braze it onto here. Drill a hole and it'll just kind of be set on there. Going to use the TIG welder for that. We'll see how that goes. I'll probably test braze on the scrap piece because I've never brazed with the TIG welder before. I've done it with oxyacetylene. It shouldn't be too hard. Just figure out the right settings and get that done. So it's about the only other fitting that was that style was PVC, and then no one made PVC barb fittings I could glue in. So this probably, I think these were like $3 or $4 a piece. So brazing rod definitely wasn't cheap. So I'll get this cut up, fit, drill a hole in that, and we'll see how brazing goes. There we go. Try a little bit. Get it all the way down. Close enough. So I got it welded up. It was definitely a challenge. Not really brazing, it was almost pretty much welding, so I did pretty much have to get the base metal hot enough to melt. I mean, it's all brass, so it was pretty similar to aluminum. I ran it on AC with 100% tungsten. I tried the 2% thoriated, and it wasn't spreading out the heat well enough, so I just went to AC. About 110 amps. Definitely had to get the base metal heated up. The first little bit of weld here was cold, and then once the base metal got warmed up, it started to flow in better, but still was a bit of a challenge. So I'm gonna cap off these ends, pressure test it, and if it all holds up, then I'll go ahead and install it. So I just cut these hoses off. Well, I cut it off at this fitting here. It had like a metal crimp, so I just took that off, cut it off, and then just hose clamped a regular hose onto there, and along with the part that ran over to the thermostat housing, just put a new hose section in, and then everything fit perfectly. I cut up the hose that originally ran up to the degas bottle because it had a nice 90 in it that was formed. So I just cut that out to fit and hose clamped it all on there. So that's all good. Got a special package today. The Griffin radiator showed up, and I went to test fit it, ran into some issues. This issue, I guess, would be on me and not Griffin, because I didn't account for the space that these silicone couplers take up. So what that means is, with this side all installed, clamp, coupler on, this is resting up against that. If we go over to this side here, the bead on this tube here is resting up against the radiator here. Clearly didn't give myself enough clearance. Two options to fix this. One, relocate this tube here, which there isn't much room because it was already pretty much on the edge of that. Second one is the one I'm probably going to go with. So I'm going to cut out my brand new radiator about a 1/2 inch in, well, not all the way down, but good section down, and that's going to give me an extra 1/2 inch clearance. And I'll just flip this plate around, cut off the edges, weld it back up in there, and that will hopefully, I'll test fit it. That was the one thing I was wanting to build all myself, was I was able to test fit it, because I mean, it looks all good in CAD, but there's things you don't account for, like the added thickness of stuff like that. So anyway, gonna mark this up, pull it out, and cut it. Gonna cringe a little bit while we're doing that, but I'm sure it'll be better. So before we pull the radiator out, I'll go over some of the other stuff I've got done in the meantime. this is kind of where we left off, was waiting on a coupler for here. I got a 45, which doesn't work because it's actually a 30 degree. They don't make a 30 degree transition coupler. So this didn't work because it bent and crumpled up in the wrong way. So I ended up making this transition pipe here, and then getting another coupler here, and so that'll be clamped in like that, and that should work. I ran hoses, cooling hose from the top port of the engine over to the degas bottle, ran from the wastegate, well, not the wastegate, but the bypass valve over to the vacuum source, and that was something else I figured out. Took the factory menagerie of vacuum line, and what I did was, there's a port on the back of the intake there. It comes up to a T, which the T runs over to the bypass valve. The other side goes to a check valve, and then to a hose that goes up to the vacuum pump. And there's also another one that goes to comes up here, goes to the Ranger HVAC system, because it uses vacuum actuated baffles for the blend door actuator, I think. And then this line here is for your vacuum booster for the brakes, and then the factory vacuum pump on the engine. I think that's kind of brings it up to date. I put clamps on a lot of this stuff, buttoned it up, finished routing the lines for the oil catch can, put a hose clamp up here so it runs up along here, shorten this up, and then this part here I think is part of the PVC system. And originally it goes into the intake, has a connection way over here on the factory Mustang. So what I did was I took that off, put a piece of hose on there, a couple 90s and fittings, and plumbed it into where this catch can flows into the air intake there. And this was a check valve, and so I moved that back upstream. So this is all downstream from that check valve, because this doesn't see boost, but this system might see vacuum, so you don't want it being a vacuum leak. So that's how that worked out. And I was able to use the excess hose from this section here to do that, so it all kind of looks like it fits. So here's kind of a quick overview of the radiator. It's about probably 2 3/4 thick. And then got the bottom mounts for it to integrate with the Ranger mount. And the upper mounts, that is one complaint I do have, is that one, they're not as thick as I spec'd them out to be, and two, they're not in the right location. They need to be up taller, so I'm gonna have to fix those. Also, it doesn't look like the outlets are like square with everything. They're a little bit angled, which I guess is kind of aesthetic thing for me. You know, it's not too hard to make those square. So anyway, that's just kind of the radiator. It looks like it has a part number ID tag on the bottom. This was done by Griffin Radiator. Cost me right about $1,200 for this, which I know sounds expensive, but it was half the price of another place that I got a quote on, so I figured, why not? So anyway, I kind of marked out the lines here where I'm going to section this. I got to mark the side lines here about a 1/2 inch, get that cut out, tacked in, check fit, and then finish welding. I also, since we're talking about this, where'd it go? My custom cooling fan shroud. This is something that I designed and had manufactured locally by the same people who've done the other stuff. It's going to, of course, the other side fit right on there. I have some brackets up top here, and then down below that this piece here will set in. I need to weld onto there. And so it has these 2 cooling fans with these rubber flaps. The idea behind that is when you're driving down the road, the air will freely flow through that instead of pushing through your fans. And then once the fans kick on, those will suck shut and it'll start pulling through the radiator. I don't know the full specs on these fans because I got them for free for my work. They're not used. I mean, they were previously owned, but they were on a prototype setup they had, brand new. Decided they weren't going to use it, so they tossed them in the dumpster. So I went and saved them. I got like 8 more of these things. So 2 of them fit on there pretty good, and got those wired up. Still waiting on connectors, Deutsch connectors. But anyway, we'll start modifying this radiator and start getting some brackets welded on for this guy to bolt onto. Alright, so we got that tacked in there. Gonna give it a test fit. It definitely clears. So now I'll go fully weld all this and get some little panels to fill in these extra holes. Just got the radiator finished up here. Got my clearance cut there and my mounting brackets redone, and it fits fairly good. Of course, if I was to redo it again, there'd be some changes I made, but otherwise fits pretty good. Got my brackets welded on for my cooling fan setup, so once I get the radiator hoses finished, I'll install that. But the next step here is connecting radiator hoses, that down there to over in here, stuff like that. I think I'm going to start on the bottom one first. That one's going to be a little tricky because I'm going to have to come out like a sharp 90. And then I got this hose right here, which is a 90 degree off of the thermostat housing. It's all silicone hose that comes out here. So I'll have to come up and then probably kind of rotate this around so it comes up and then kind of angles into this hose here in some way. This one over here, it's quite the short jaunt here, so I'm thinking about actually cutting this tube right here and angling it over about like so that we have a nice easier transition to get up into that. So probably like cut right there and actually probably end up shortening it up a little bit. So I got everything pretty much buttoned up, just filled it up with water, got my hoses and connections made. That one down there did a 90 out and up into my rubber hose. And this one here, I decided to go with the short double S for now. Maybe later, get some time, I'll do the angle part like I was talking about. But for right now, I think that's going to work. It doesn't look too bad. It's not super sharp. So I got the cooling fan all installed here, bolted up, and got it wired up kind of temporarily right now. Going to use Deutsch connectors, but I don't have the actual plug part, so I just crimped on the end terminals and pushed them together, then put some heat shrink in there. Had to order one of the sizes that didn't have it, so that's probably going to take like I think a couple weeks. Stuff was on back order or something like that. So it'll work, but right now just kind of temporary connected there. So once we get that all buttoned up, or once we get the ends on that, I'll probably end up putting some adhesive strips on here for a zip tie attachment, so this will all kind of get stuck over on that. filled it with water right now. That way if there's any issues, leaks or anything, it's not a giant mess with antifreeze. It's just straight water that'll leak out. I just use regular distilled water, so it wasn't too expensive versus antifreeze though. Back to filling this, fill with the radiator cap here, and also they have this port on this upper tube here, which I was able to put a funnel in and just fill directly there. It also kind of helped vent stuff out. So I'm gonna do a double check once over, make sure everything's kind of buttoned up, and I'm gonna fire this up. I've had it started already, so I know it'll start up and run because I had other issues with the wiring harness not being wired correctly from Ford in the fuse box here. But anyway, got that all sorted out. So gonna start it up, look for leaks, stuff like that, and then we'll take it for a test drive. It's actually pretty quiet. Cold idle settled down there. I don't see any major leaks yet. Pretty exciting stuff. It's the longest I've had it running. I got a tractor in the way behind this. I'm gonna go move that and we'll back this out. Actually sees the light of day in 2 years. At least it's a running truck. Pretty sweet. Hopefully you can see this, but got a cob access port in here, so I'm able to check the temperature, boost pressure, AFR. I don't know what the APP threshold is, but we got the charge air temp and the battery voltage. Gonna clean off this windshield before we take a drive. Got a little dusty in the shop. Always gotta remember a fire extinguisher. Alrighty. Buckle up for safety. Forgot something, a seat belt. We'll take this one easy. Scoots. Definitely a close ratio, that's for sure. That was a pretty good test drive. Got it back in the shop here. Got the hood on. Earlier before the test drive, I forgot to mention I got the bed bolted on there, so it's all pretty much put back together. Calibrated the speedometer and also got the seat belt installed down there. There's some more things I got to do. One of them is get a carpet kit in. Got a parts truck that has factory carpet and probably some sound deadener. Definitely put something on top of that. Aluminum there. Need to mount the OBD2 port and then find some sort of shifter boot for that, and probably some other things here and there. There's some plugs I need to put in, stuff like that, but it's drivable. Gonna take these wheels off, get them powder coated and put brand new tires on there. So that's probably going to be it on this episode. Hopefully it's not too long. There's going to be more videos on this as I do more little things, but we'll probably start moving on to some other projects. Going to actually take this down to a burnout competition today, so I'll post another video on that. Should be pretty good. I hope you've enjoyed the build on this. I sure have, especially now that it's finished. Going to start driving it, definitely going to enjoy it. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, comment down below. Stay tuned for more projects, and I'll catch you guys later.